Hey, so let's talk about how you back out of a real estate transaction, right? How you terminate, how you withdraw, how you cancel, whatever you want to talk about in regards to removing yourself as a buyer from a real estate transaction, and the timeline to do so, what contingencies to look for, what types of outs that you have. And in full disclosure, I am not a real estate attorney. Every state is different. I'm out here in Oregon. So if you have any questions, always advise legal counsel, advise the licensed real estate broker in your state. So let's start off by, in the first parts of the transaction, when you make an offer and it's going to be accepted, there's going to be a length of time that you have until you can get your earnest money into escrow. And that is logistically how many business days you have to put your earnest money deposit into escrow. The majority of people who get cold feet or want to back out of a transaction or walk the property once, maybe walked it twice, or talk to a lender and they're not sure if it's going to appraise, they back out between when the purchase and sale agreement was signed and the actual physical day and time that they hand the earnest money check in. As me as a real estate broker, in those first couple days, I'm always looking for that what I call that explosive email. That's the buyer's agent telling me that their buyer is backing out. And the reason that they can back out in those few days is that the earnest money hasn't been deposited yet. And so in most contract law, there is no such thing as a contract without consideration. And consideration is some sort of payment transfer from one party to the other, so that you have a signed offer by the buyer and seller, but you don't have that transfer of monetary goods or currency to create what I call an executable contract. Not an executed contract, but a contract that has both a contract, an agreement, and consideration. So that's the highest in percentage of people when they get cold feet. That's when they can exit the transaction. So if you're in a transaction, you don't want it anymore, obviously advise legal counsel and talk to your real estate agent. But in most instances, you can just back out before you deposit earnest money and say, you know what, we need to terminate for whatever reason. That termination is usually done by an addendum that is signed by both parties. And because there's no earnest money collected yet, the instructions to the escrow company on how to disperse the earnest money is zero. It's not applicable. Okay? Next, if you've already deposited your earnest money and you want to back out of a transaction, you need to understand what types of contingencies are involved in a real estate transaction. Here in Oregon, you're usually going to have a professional inspection, and that's going to be, right again, there's going to be this timeline. How many business days are you as the buyer given to professionally inspect the property? If you don't like anything about the property or the repairs that are needed or the condition that it's in, then you can have a buyer disapproval of the inspection, and you can fill out the withdrawal or mutual release, whatever it's called in your state, and you can blow up the deal. So if you're within that inspection contingency, you have the ability to exit that contract for almost any reason within reasonable regards. Next thing I want to talk about is there's other types of inspections that are inside that real estate contract. One of them, which is a title contingency. It's not an inspection, but it's really an inspection of the title report. Are there any liens against the property? Are there any encroachments or easements that have not been disclosed? Is it owned by somebody else who's not the seller, right? There's things that come up in that preliminary title report, which you'll look at that timeline of days that you're allowed to review it, and days that give you the ability to withdraw from the transaction based upon what are the findings of that preliminary title report. So that's the second area in which you can exit the deal. It's a little bit more complicated because if it comes back clean, you're not going to be withdrawing because you have no reason to, and there's nothing that's a red flag. So you can't use the title contingency in most cases to withdraw yourself from the transaction. The third and most popular is going to be, or not as popular for sellers, is that appraisal contingency. Some states have an automatic appraisal contingency for anybody who's not using cash, meaning if the property comes back and does not appraise for what the selling party wants for the property, the buyer has the ability to terminate the transaction and get their earnest money back, okay? There's other types of contingencies and there's other types of addendums that attach to that contract that also give you the ability to exit, okay? In investment properties, we use an investment property addendum. It allows you to look at rent roll, copies of leases, P&Ls, Schedule E's, insurance documents, anything that you've requested up front that the seller has agreed to give you. If they don't give it to you or you're not approval of it, you can back out, okay? There's other types of contingencies that are based upon having a private well. Is it tested? What's the flow rate? All of those details. Then there's the inspection of the septic, right? There's all these different addendums, right, that have put into the contract, if applicable, right? You don't put a private well or a septic addendum into a property that's on public well or septic. It gives you the ability to remove yourself from those transactions because it's applicable to the property itself, right? Then there's a long list of other contingencies that you can create, right? It's contingent upon partner approval, meaning you're an investor, you go and look at the property, but your partner needs to come down from Portland or wherever you are to walk the property as well. If you both can concur on it, then you're gonna move forward with the transaction. There's creative contingencies that you create, right? Contingent upon buyer doing walkthrough, right? If you're writing a sight unseen, walkthrough upon accepted offer type of investment deal. Then there's a whole list of other things, creative contingencies that could be added, right? It's contingent upon the seller putting a new roof on it because it's a blatant defect that we see that needs to be corrected, right? So all in all, you have all these different timelines and milestones of a transaction and what you dictate when you write that offer and what timeline you give yourself for each of those milestones. But ultimately what you need to be careful of is that if you put your earnest money in and you've waived your inspection and there is no appraisal, you're going to have a breach of contract and the seller most likely is going to be dispersed that earnest money because you did not fulfill your obligations of that contract. And I specifically know one instance right now that's in litigation where somebody didn't show up to closing. The seller just decided not to sell the property after the buyer had gone through everything that they were required to, but the seller decided to not execute that contract. And that is a breach of contract. It creates a bunch of headaches, and ultimately you don't want to be put in that situation. But to review and really give you some context to why this is super important as a buyer, I want you to go through these questions for yourself. When I'm looking at a property, and I've always had this, I've only withdrawn from 2 transactions, one of which was a condition of the property, a second was a financing issue that I couldn't get an underwriter to write on it. But in my whole entire career as an investor and as a real estate broker, I always tell myself, I don't write offers on properties unless I know I can close on them. So sending the property to your lender prior to writing an offer is critical. Letting them make the decision of like, hey, is your offer crazy? What is it probably going to appraise for? What's the monthly payment going to be, right? You don't want to get into a purchase process if you can't afford the monthly payment. That makes no absolute sense. So I want you to understand that you need to ask yourself before you write an offer with a real estate agent, have I looked at the location? Have I looked at the condition of the property? Have I looked at any red flag repairs that need to be immediately addressed? Does the price reflect what information I have gathered, all that fact gathering? Am I happy with what school district it's in, or how close it is to the grocery store or post office? Is there anything like the neighbor's condition of their property or anything that's going to come up that I might second guess this purchase, right? And I want everybody to ask themselves, not so much the aspect of sleeping on it and thinking about the deal for too long, because that can lose you a bunch of deals or a good house, but asking yourself, hey, what are your concerns with the property? What are my concerns with the property? What are the pros and cons? Ultimately, let's write this down. Let's create a process about it. And if we vote thumbs up, we'll write an offer on it, right? And so if you're dealing with a husband, wife, or a partnership, or any type of two-person decision process, I always suggest of really looking at properties, touring them quickly as soon as they come on market, and then being able to work with your agent and giving them the direction that they need with how they should write that purchase and sale agreement, and what exits or outs that you need in terms of contingencies to feel comfortable even getting into that contract. The number one problem I see is people get excited, they get amped up, they're highly emotional about the transaction, and then they jump in and then they waste everyone's time. Not only the real estate agent from the buyer side, but the listing agent has to go back and forth with their client and sign paperwork. They waste the title company's time opening up escrow, scanning documents, opening up a preliminary title report, right? They waste their lender's time starting the underwriting process, collecting documents, right? They waste an inspector's time to go out there. Well, it's not really wasting their time because they're profiting from it, but you get my point. They waste an appraiser's time if they are going to have an appraisal and then back out because they wrote some ridiculous offer that they know is not going to appraise, right? So there's all these delicate balancing points that as a buyer, a consumer, you need to understand that when you go into a transaction, it affects a lot of people and their friends and family and calendar and time and bandwidth as soon as they go into that transaction, right? There has been countless deals that have been withdrawn after the earnest money deposit, after approval processes have gone on, that have created hours and hours of unpaid work, right? It's just part of the job, right? You could say that it's nature of the business. But ultimately what you're trying to do, and why I see a lot of jaded real estate agents, is that that's happened to them over and over and over and over, and people just don't get it, right? So I have these frontward expectation conversations with my buyers and sellers about this is how the process is going to go. This is my checklist and an inspection process or appraisal process that I like to look at. And I try to be very proactive about having these conversations before we write offers or before we list properties. Because why? It saves your client time, it saves your agent time, it saves everybody the stress and anxiety and high emotional impact of a real estate transaction. So back to the question, how do I get out of a real estate deal? Or how do I cancel my contract, right? Or how do I terminate my purchase and sale agreement? I just gave you a million places that are highly critical to the transaction and understanding that process. So make sure you find a great real estate agent. Make sure you have a great real estate attorney. If you need to ask questions, it's worth the $500 to $1,000 to $1,500 if you're buying a $300,000 property. I'm telling you right now. Make sure that your agent has a great inspection company, and make sure that you ask questions. Make sure you go through that pro and con process, that mutual approval process. But understand, things move in real estate speed. You got to be quick. You got to be out there seeing the properties, being able to make decisions quickly, and then always asking yourself, are we willing to get into a bidding war? Are we willing to pay what that price of that property is currently at or what we're going to offer at, right? And putting all of that in to a organized, concise plan is why you work with a real estate agent that knows what they're doing. So if you like this content, please hit the notification bell, subscribe to my channel, ask me any questions if you have. All my contact information is below. And do me a favor, don't write offers on things you don't want to close on unless it's an inspection issue or an appraisal issue. Take care.